a little bit less on AI. So the session is strengthening data security posture. And what we're going to cover in this session, we'll come to that a little bit, is how in this evolving landscape of data infrastructure can you use interesting AI techniques and technologies to actually further strengthen your data security posture. That's kind of going to be the thesis of the topic. Who are we? LightBeam, we are a pioneer focused on zero trust data protection. Zero trust means don't trust anyone, don't trust yourself, don't trust myself, don't trust your employees, definitely don't trust the vendor, right? That's zero trust. And so we'll talk about how we enable zero trust data protection a little bit. It's not going to be a vendor talk 100% of the time. It's going to be that 33% of the time. So just, right, 1/3 of the time I will talk about how LightBeam helps you. 2/3 of the time will be more about data security, what has changed, and a little bit around AI. We are an international company. You can see some of that, SOC 2 certified. A lot of the customers that we do business with come from regulated industries like healthcare, financial services, insurance, law firms, and so on and so forth. We've been a little lucky to be recognized by industry. I suppose we'll talk about that a little bit. But here it is. So as I promised you, there are 3 topics at the top. The second one is where I'll talk a little bit about LightBeam. The first one is all about enterprise data security. Has something changed in the last 2 years? Then we'll get into a little bit about how we help. And the final one will be, I was just in the speaker lounge and we were talking to a number of folks. And one of the concerns that kept coming up over and over again is as CISOs, as cybersecurity leaders in your companies and your businesses are trying to figure out how to best use AI, whether you like it or not. Some companies have taken the approach of saying AI is okay, use whatever, ChatGPT, whatever. Some companies have taken the approach to say, no, everything has to be complete lockdown. Right? And so we're going to cover a little bit of that, which is what are the rewards of using AI, what are the risks, and we'll at least propose our thesis. We've been doing a lot of research into this AI governance topic as a company. We'll present our thesis of what are the rewards, what are the risks, how can you kind of take care of such risks, essentially. With that, so simple question, again, audience poll. Which car would you like to drive of the 2 that you see on the screen? On the left?
On the right.
On the right. Okay, well, if it were up to me, I would definitely go with the gentleman over there. I would love to drive the car on the left, for sure, 100%, hands down. Whoever voted for on the right, you are a family guy, that's all I will say.
No, it's just
So Alex is getting ahead of himself. So now, with this new information, the car on the left has no brakes or airbags. Clearly, everyone is going to say, well, if it doesn't have any brakes or airbags, I'll probably prefer the car on the right. It's amazing how similar this is to data governance actually these days. In that, and that incorporates AI governance as well. Our thesis is data without governance is a car without brakes. You have all the access to the data. You can give everyone access to data. But if there's no governance, your data is going to get leaked out. Exhibit A, Samsung, unfortunately. Exhibit B, C, D, all the way to Z. Every day there is some exhibit, unfortunately, right? A lot of school districts are getting hacked and getting attacked by ransomware, right? So that's why this session, which is all about data governance, right? And how do you secure your data so that your users, your customers feel safe, feel secure, and your users have the necessary data to go about their businesses in some sense. Now, has something changed? Just in the last 2 years, actually. I'm not talking about 20 years. Of course, a lot of things have changed in the last 20 years. Goes without saying. When I started my career, I hope I don't look this, I'm not dating myself, but I started my career on mainframe. I was the storage guy, was supporting storage for mainframe technologies, working on FICON switches and stuff like that. Hopefully, most of you don't have to ever worry about that. But there was a transformation in the early 2000s from client computing to the internet, and before that from mainframe to client computing. Just in the last 2 years, what we are seeing is the middle thing, which is every application that your companies are using, every single one of them have APIs these days. APIs mean that other applications can talk to them, suck their data, get their data, read access, write access, whatever. But data is flowing everywhere, unfortunately. So because I like to call that insertion points, essentially. You have no idea how data is like water. Wherever it finds its way, it will just go there and wet everything, unfortunately. So that's what has changed in our mind just in the last 2 years, by the way. Every single new application that you're using, including something like Microsoft 365. I mean, gone are the days when you could have an Exchange server running in your environment, and every email is in your Exchange server. Now it's Office 365. Every email is Microsoft. And they also provide API access to a lot of vendor community and so on and so forth, which is good. They can provide additional services, but it's also bad because now your emails are getting read by multiple third parties, unfortunately. So that's the insertion point. And then last but not least, of course, is the regulatory environment that we are dealing with. Here in Canada, there is Law 25. In Quebec, obviously, for data privacy. There is Bill C-27 that's getting discussed in the Parliament. Of course, internationally, there is GDPR. There is AI, President's Order, Executive Order, ADMT, which is automated decision-making technologies. There's a lot of regulatory mandates that are coming, which govern the use of how you process, store, and share data, essentially. This is what I mean when I say has something changed just in the last 2 years. And this is pre-AI, by the way. Post-AI, things have gone even worse, unfortunately, right? Which will be like what has changed in the last 3 months, I would say. So this is where, for some of you who were dealing with this in the early 2000s, right? There was this thing called Y2K bug. Everyone was losing their minds. How do I take care of? This is the Y2K bug of this generation, of the right now, actually. Like, how do I make sure that I can take advantage of the data that I have as a school district, as an organization dealing with financial, as an organization dealing with law data, take advantage of that, but without the data security and data privacy concerns. That's the reason why we started LightBeam, when we started it. So what do we see? We do business with multiple organizations in the US, in Canada, and internationally. What we see is even a mid-market organization, mid-size, 1,000 people or under an employee size, even they have more than 40 applications where sensitive data is present. If you think that's too much, just ask me. I'm really, a startup, if you think about it. I don't have 1,000 people working within the company. But even we have about 60 applications that we are using, all the way from your HR system, finance system, to messaging platforms like Teams. Office 365 itself has like 4 to 5 applications, right? From email to SharePoint to OneDrive. All of those applications, unfortunately, have sensitive data in them, which is a real problem. Because if you don't know where your sensitive data is, I don't know whether all of you were there at the keynote, the first line of the keynote was know where your assets are. And I'm talking about the digital assets over here. Here's something interesting that I came across very recently. A new employee that joins our organizations on day 1 has access to near about 6 million documents. Day 1. I join a company, I have access to 6 million documents. Now, of course, when I'm an employee, yes, of course, some vetting was done during my interview process. But should I have access to these many documents on day 1? I mean, that's not zero trust. That's basically 100% trust for everything. And this is why you get incidents like data exposure. Not because the employee is trying to do anything malicious, but because they don't know what the practices are, what the trainings are, what the security posture they need to maintain. The phishing attacks, we get, or I personally get, my employer reports to me that they get messages saying, hey, this is Priyadarshi, are you available? And it's not coming from my mailbox. I mean, it's not coming from my phone number. It's some other phishing. What will happen to a new employee? They'll say, oh, this guy is asking me. Yeah, of course. What do you need? Oh, I need just a $200 gift card. Oh, of course, here's a $200 gift card. And that's it. Right? And this is happening day in and day out, actually. I mean, I could actually, in the next time, I'll actually have a screenshot of the message that our employees are getting. So that's the problem. 6 million documents on day 1. Now, you might say, well, I don't have 6 million documents. Maybe it's 60,000 documents. It doesn't really matter. All it takes is one text message to get phishing attack in your organization. All that takes is one text message, right? Now, this is where, now I'll talk about a little bit how we have been helping organizations, right? So this is the second part of the journey, right, on the 3 parts. What we do at LightBeam is we are all about zero trust. We'll scan all of your data repositories, structured, unstructured, and semi-structured. So structured will be all your databases, unstructured will be your file repositories. Semi-structured, any guesses? What might semi-structured data be?
Data lake.
Come again?
Data lake.
Sorry, Steve?
Data lake.
Tailing?
Data lake.
Data lake. Yes, data lake could have structured and semi-structured. Semi-structured would be your ticketing systems, for example. ServiceNow, Jira, anything, any ticketing, Salesforce, by the way, right? Because it has some structure, but it has also a lot of unstructured data. We scan all of that. Now, here's where the zero trust principle comes into picture. We are not a SaaS service. When we started LightBeam, SaaS was all the craze. Everyone was building SaaS service. And we just couldn't reconcile the fact that if I'm going to scan all your sensitive data, how can you trust me, a person who you don't even know, you probably just met maybe a month back or some conference like this. How can you trust me with all your sensitive data to be scanned? So we designed a system that works in your environment, meaning LightBeam, the entire stack that we're going to talk about, gets deployed in your environment, on-prem or in cloud, whatever. None of your data or metadata or the UI ever leaves your network. You are in full control. All the network posture that you have maintained so far, firewalls and this and that, our system benefits from all of that because we are running in your environment, essentially. So that's the principle of zero trust, right? The principle of zero trust is don't trust anyone, least of all a vendor, obviously. So I'm going to answer 3 questions right now, which is what data you have, whose data you have, and how do you automate? The automation is where we'll talk a little bit more about AI. But the first question, again, I'm going to start with the keynote presenter started with, which is where are your assets? What kind of sensitive data do you have? That's the first thing that we help describe. The way we do it is, if you look at this number on the screen, it's a 9-digit number. Any guesses on existing technologies, what they might report that number as? SIN. Exactly. And by the way, that has been the way it has been for the last 15 years, by the way. You look at a number, you have a regular expression pattern that it matches, and you go, oh, that's a SIN, right? Well, thankfully, now with advanced techniques, advanced AI, you can actually look at the context. You don't have to look at the number. You can actually look at the context to say, what's going on? Where is this 9-digit number appearing? Oh, this is a chat message. Someone is asking for David's medical record number. So probably, and remember, it's probably, that number is a medical record number, right? This is the contextual AI in action. Nothing about LightBeam. You're absolutely welcome to go and look at other AI tools, but this is a good AI system doesn't go with the content that it is looking at. It goes with the context and the content, and this is an example of the context, right? Now you know 2 things, that it's a medical record number. You don't know for sure, by the way. You'll have to keep scanning, look at it, this number might appear at other places, and then slowly and gradually you figure out, this is definitely, it walks like a dog, talks like a dog, swims like a dog, it is a dog. That's how AI system is figuring out, right? The other thing that's it's actually doing is, it's actually also figuring out where else have I seen this data. See, this is fairly interesting because now I don't think there's any company or organization that only deals in one data repository. Like, there's no company that only has file servers. They have file servers, SharePoint, and also SQL database, right? So what it is doing, it's actually figuring out what kind of sensitive data is present across your entire data infrastructure. What is it that is detecting? It's detected that MRN with a SIN and an MRN with an address, and it's actually presenting a full map of sensitive data that it is detecting across different data repositories. Any questions thus far? We have enough time, by the way, for questions, so don't hesitate to raise your hand and ask a question. Right? Here's another thing. As I was talking to some of you before the session, data classification as a topic kept coming up over and over again. And so again, it goes back to the same thing, which is not about the content, because you could have a document that has 0 financial information, and it could still be a financial document. For example, if you file a risk report, 10K or 10Q, I'm sure there is something in parallel here as well. they don't necessarily have dollars and cents amount. They could, but they don't, because they are talking about risks. But it's a financial document at the end of the day, right? So again, this is the same thing about not looking at the content, but looking at the context. And you can actually, these are the easy ones, right? You can actually look at name, SIN, medical record number, credit card. But you can also look at, and classify documents as financial, HR, legal contracts, et cetera. The question this is helping you understand is, if you have, let's say, an S3 bucket, Amazon S3 bucket, and you never expected your contracts to be there, a system can go and scan your S3 bucket and tell you, no, there are contracts in there. And you're like, well, why are there contracts? Yeah, there shouldn't be. And so that system is now going to flag you for that. But more interestingly, you can actually teach. So AI is a dog. You can teach new tricks, which is one of the best things we love about AI. Is actually, it's like a kid. It's like a child. You can teach AI new tricks, actually, in your environment. You're not sending any data outside. So there are customers who have actually taught our AI how to detect patents within their system, how to detect drug formulae. Large pharmaceutical companies have used AI to teach the AI system what does a drug formula look like. If you are a law firm, you can teach AI to say, this is the kind of case document that you have, right? So you can actually teach AI whatever you want, and the best part of it is that teaching, that learning is actually not leaving your premises. It's still very much inside your premises, and that way all the learning that's happening, let's say in your environment, is completely different from the learning that's happening in a different customer's environment, which means that this becomes your baby, your AI, a local AI, essentially, correct? So I'll keep moving, but if you have any questions, please raise my hand. Go ahead, please.
How do they even know how many applications they have? Because this is the biggest problem. We've been talking about next-gen firewalls, we're talking about ZTNA, and people still don't have an idea on the amount of applications they have on discovery. So is your solution helps to understand, or what's the process to understanding how to actually plug in your solution when where?
Makes sense, yeah. So I'll answer that question briefly, if that's okay, and then we can continue the discussion after the session as well, of course, right? It is one of the key questions, essentially. The way any good system, again, I'm not trying to make it for LightBeam, but any good system works is it plugs into your root account with read-only access, and then uses that to crawl into your environment to figure out what data, what systems you have. So for example, if you plug into your AWS account, we'll figure out what kind of databases, RDS databases do you have running? What kind of S3 buckets do you have running? Right? But it does mean that you are able to plug into the root account. Right? If you don't plug into the root account, and you wouldn't, why would you? If it was a third-party system where data is actually leaving your network, then it would be a real problem. But because it's all inside of your network, most customers are able to actually take that approach.
Just out of curiosity, is it searching and then queuing up words that would be suspiciously categorized as personal, or how is it even looking for what it's looking for?
It has been, so the question was, how is it looking for what it is looking for, right? And the answer to that is, obviously, any AI system has to have machine learning ahead of it, obviously. So we have trained the model over a number of, we call them attributes. SIN is an attribute for us, a name, an address, a PCI data like credit card is an attribute, and there are like 230 different types of attributes. So if it will, it has already been trained on that, but if you have a new attribute, let's say, then you can actually also train the AI model on that attribute, or a new document that you want to classify. So it's really like a kid, right? It's really like a child. The more you train it, the better it gets, essentially. It's really like that, essentially. Now, let's talk about, I'll start with an example over here. Let's say I'm working on Teams, and my colleague, Jane, she asked me for my credit card number for some reason. And I shared that, my credit card with Jane. Security folks will say, I shouldn't be doing that. That's really not a good thing to do, that you're sharing your credit card on Teams. And I would agree. But it's not the end of the world. I'm putting my data at risk. There might be a valid reason. Jane might be in some sort of a situation where she needs my So I gave it to her, right? Obviously, hopefully I'm not getting fished, and that's the big hope, right, obviously. But if I were to share my customer's credit card on Teams, that would be a problem, wouldn't it? In no situation should I be sharing a customer's credit card with my coworker. Under no situation. There isn't a situation. If she needs access to that, she should be able to get access to the right system and get the information from there. She shouldn't be asking me for information on Teams or email or what have you. The problem is, how does a system know that this 16-digit number that I have detected, that number is a coworker's information or a customer's information? Just a simple question. How does the system know that it's coworkers versus my customers? It's a really hard problem, it turns out, actually. This is one of the things that whose data you have. So which is the problem is, if you only know what data, you can do your security job to a certain extent. But if you know whose data, if you know that, oh, this data belongs to Jane Doe, who is a customer, versus this data belongs to Jane Doe, who is a partner, versus an employee, you can actually take different types of actions. So let me talk about that a little bit over here. So you can see here on the left-hand side, we are scanning your data repositories. We are figuring out what kind of system, what kind of data you have. Using AI, we are actually able to figure out whose data you have. Now, this is a topic that I can talk about for probably 2 hours. So I'm going to not talk about it as much in detail. But go back to if I go back to that example of detecting a credit card or an address, what this system is telling me is to say, oh, this data actually belongs to John Doe, who actually is a customer of yours. So what's the customer data? And we work with a lot of financial institutions, as I was telling at the outset. A lot of their PCI compliance relies on, is cardholder data getting exposed anywhere else where it shouldn't be? How do you know it's a cardholder data? Well, this is how. Because you can actually figure out that, oh, this data that I've detected is actually a cardholder data or a customer data. And this is using a technique called entity resolution, which I won't get into right now. But here's an example, right, essentially. So think about it this way. You have an S3 bucket. We detected this number over here. Now, we can tell you what this number is, but we can't tell you whose number this is, right? This might be a medical record number or a SIN, but we can't tell you whose number it is. What we do is we actually cross-reference that data that we have detected in an S3 bucket with a source of truth. This source of truth could be your SQL server. It could be your Salesforce. It could be whatever you designate as source of truth. And you can see that cross-referencing is happening and say, this data belongs to Jane Doe, who is an account holder within my bank, all of a sudden. So you see, this is the cross-referencing actually is one of the biggest advantages of new Gen AI system, is they are able to take data from one data repository and cross-reference against your source of truth to provide you this level of detail, in which case now as security and SecOps is all about response, obviously. You can actually create a response saying, a customer data is getting exposed in S3, so that's a real problem. Take immediate action. Now, take immediate action is something that you can actually ask the tool to do, or you can take you can ask your team to do, right? You can ask your tool to say, take immediate action, redact that sensitive content that I'm detecting. Redact that sensitive content that I'm detecting in S3, or delete this file, or archive this file in a secure location because I don't want this file to be present in S3, right? So that's a tool doing that. Or you can generate an alert and give it to your team to say, hey, something is going on over here, right? But the biggest part that I think even where modern AI tools have moved the industry forward is in this cross-referencing. You can see earlier it was all about this, and now it is about cross-referencing. Please go ahead.
Can this actually go into like the M365 quarantine space and look at data that's quarantined because of whatever policy or requirements you've had to make sure that that data doesn't get to its destination because of certain rules, and have this kind of discover that? Because what happens, at least from what I've seen, is that queue builds up and you're looking at information and attachments that are there, but you're not really, you don't have the full picture as to what information is actually sitting in that queue.
It makes sense, yeah. Just I'll repeat the question for everyone's benefit. So the question from Steve is, can you go and scan the quarantine space, for example, and give me a lot more detail into what was there, why did it get quarantined, and And the answer is yes, because a quarantine space is just a bunch of files as a system. So yes, the system will go and scan your quarantine space. But the biggest advantage is you can now, whatever you find, you can actually cross-reference against your source of truth. And you can actually get a lot more detail, contextual detail into what's going on, what got quarantined, right? That's really the biggest development of the last, I would say, 6 to 9 months in the AI space. Make sense? Go ahead.
What if your source of truth is encrypted?
Yes, great. So the question is, what if your source of truth is encrypted? As much as I would like to tell you, we are still not doing quantum computing, so we can't break your encryption, right? As much as I would like to tell you. However, there are ways. So I can't break your encryption, obviously. But if you're doing server-side encryption, it's completely transparent to us. If you're doing client-side encryption, then you will have to share the keys. Again, you're not sharing the keys with me or the company. You're sharing the keys with an appliance that's running in your environment so that it can do the key decryption, scan it, and then lock it back.
So what protections do you have on your AI? Because as it's learning your environment, it's going to develop a lot you mentioned. The amount of data is probably a great point of attack.
Yes, great. So it's a great question, and it's a very timely question because we're going to actually talk about AI right now. But having said that, I will answer that question right away. Any modern, well, I don't want to talk about ChatGPT because obviously it sucks in all the data, obviously. I want to talk about systems that are designed to solve a particular, specific problem, right? And here, this system is designed to solve a specific problem about data security and data governance. We don't store your data, period. None of your files, because otherwise our storage requirements are going to become petabyte, right? Because we'll keep scanning your databases and file repositories, and we'll just keep becoming fatter and fatter. We don't store your data at all. What we store is links to where we have detected the data. Oh, I found a SYN. That SYN was detected in this file present in SharePoint. That's the map is what we are storing, so that when you query our system, we can tell you, yes, this file is present over here, and this file has contained SYN. Having said that, that is still not good enough. So we are running in your environment, and we are storing some metadata, but that's still not good enough. So what we do is we actually store it as a one-way hash, so that if someone actually goes and looks into our system for anything that's highly sensitive, we do store names and addresses, by the way, because those are needed to create the reference maps. But SYN, medical record number, credit card, anything that you would deem high sensitive, they are stored as a one-way hash in our system. So this is the topic 1/3 of you wanted to know. So this is the now automation, right? So we've talked about detection. We have talked about whose data you have and why that is interesting and meaningful. But how do you now automate the response, essentially? And so that's where we'll talk a little bit about AI. I'm going to skip certain slides just in the interest of time. But I think I talked about that you can make the AI system learn in your environment, enforce policies, and automate the response. Here's a very, very brief example. This is an actual Zendesk ticket. If you use Zendesk or Salesforce, it doesn't really matter, or ServiceNow, any ticketing system. This is an actual Zendesk example where someone put their sensitive data. Mostly the customers, customers put their sensitive data. They're opening a support ticket. They don't know what data to put and what data not to put. They're trying to give you all the data so that your support individuals could actually triage their tickets quickly. And in this instance, the policy for the customer is that, yeah, I want the data, but after the ticket has been closed, a year later, I want that data to be redacted, right? So it's a fairly, complex policy to say you should have the data, you should see the ticket status, it's closed. If it's closed, a year from then, redact any sensitive content. And that's what the system is doing on its own. You see, actual ticket is getting redacted, right? So part of automation, a journey over here. The best part, by the way, is because this system is actually learning from your own data, your source of truth, by the way, no hallucination or exfiltration, right? So your AI system is not hallucinating. It's not taking your name and sending it somewhere. It's not taking your name and confusing that with something else. It's learning from your own environment. That's the best part about localized AI system, right, essentially. So if you don't take anything from this session, I would request you to take just one thing. If you're considering an AI platform, make it local. If you do that, 90% of the problem goes away as a CISO or security. Just make it local. That's it. I don't want to send my data. I don't want to send my metadata. If someone is telling you, oh, we just only send metadata, no. Why are you sending metadata? No. Everything is data at the end of the day. Don't send it. That's the one thing that I would like to just, to take home. If you take now, there are we'll talk a little bit about what are the issues, the risks that you may need to be aware with as you're working with AI systems. And I like to call them as ABCD. It's a really easy moniker. I made it for myself so that I could remember it properly, right? But ABCD stands for, AB is AI bias, AB. C is for consent violation. D is for data exfiltration. Hopefully easy enough, right? Now, what does that mean? Okay, so I'll start with consent. Some of your companies might be using AI today. Some of your companies might be training your AI model on data. Do you have consent for that data? If you're using my data, do you have my consent or any customer's data? If you don't, it's a problem. And the society at large is becoming more and more privacy conscious, which is good. As an individual member of the society, I am happy that society is becoming more and more privacy conscious. So if you're using that data, you can actually use AI. You can see, I don't know whether it is visible enough, but you can actually see how the data is actually getting redacted and masked. And now this image, which is a driver's license, has a lot of sensitive data, is actually getting sanitized, essentially. Now you can actually use something like this to your AI model because you're not using data about Jane Doe. Your AI model doesn't know that it's data about Jane Doe, right? So that's C, ABCD, C, consent violation. This one actually makes it a little bit better. So I don't know why I put that slide there. So you can see AI bias, consent, data exfiltration. What you see here, by the way, is you see a lot of the use cases that we see enterprises using AI for. I think a lot of you are aware of chatbots, probably all of you, right? All of us are aware. Data discovery, data loss prevention, automated tracking of tickets and so on, data classification, risk assessment, decision making. A lot of the good, and these are good things, by the way. I'm not here to say or say that don't use AI for any of these things. What I'm here to kind of draw your attention to is as your teams are using this, as security leaders, you need to be concerned about ABCD, essentially, right? AI bias, consent violation, data exfiltration. I think I gave an example of consent violation, which is when you're using data to train your AI models, do you have consent? If you don't have consent, anonymize that data. Let's take a quick look. Okay, fine. If you come to our booth, we'll probably show you a few things. Thanks, marketing team. Let's see. I think I'm pretty much out of the slides now. I guess so. Okay, let's take I had a few more slides, I thought, but maybe not. Okay, let's take a quick look at, and we got 5 minutes. So it's good for time for Q&A now. I'll use a minute to talk about AI bias and data exfiltration. So I think data exfiltration, I think we are all on the same page, right? When you're using AI model, make it local. As simple as that. Don't let your data get out of your environment. Best way, data or metadata, or UI for that matter, right? So we've covered that. We've covered consent violation. We haven't covered AI bias. My favorite example, I'm training a model, and you see, AI being fairly advanced technology, there are only a few models, like the BERT model from Google, or the model from Amazon, which is their Bedrock, right? Or the model from Facebook. There are only a few models that everyone is using, by the way. But then they're taking that model and they're training that model on their own data sets so that the model does what they want it to do. The typical AI use case, essentially, or the way AI engineering works. Now, there's a data set that you have that is perfectly gender balanced. 50% males, 50% females. Is that a good data set? Not if you're selling ladies' handbags. I would probably say that if you're selling ladies' handbags, most of your data should actually be about female buyers, most of it. We do go and shop for our better halves as well sometimes, so yes, our data might get in there, but most of it. So if you're training your AI on a data set that's not representative of your buyer persona, your data is already biased, unfortunately. You can train the model as much as you want, it's not gonna give you the right results. That's what I call about AI bias. It's not about being biased or unbiased in a way that society at large understands bias. It's about what's your customer sample, right? If your customer sample is 100% females, you probably want your AI data to reflect that. Here's another, it's a real case actually. Banks, financial institutions, banks in particular, they struck out race as a reason from their loan application to say, I will strike out race so that I don't make decisions based on race. Even that unconscious bias that might creep in during my, I'll strike out race so that information is not available. Okay, that's good, 100%. But after 2 years of analysis, what MIT detected was that they are using data, they're actually granting more loan applications to people who live in certain zip codes, which is actually nothing but representative of a very biased, very skewed data set, essentially. So all of a sudden, your AI bias, you have to start thinking about, if that's the kind of data I'm using, I should know where this data is coming from. Again, that whose data is it that I'm using? What zip codes do these individuals live in? If everyone is living in the same GTA or Montreal area, what about the rest of the country, right? So it's very interesting that AI bias is one of my favorite topics of mine. I think probably you can see it on my face. Keep talking about it, but it's if your teams are using, and because you're security leaders, you'll probably get called in, or your governance team might get called in to say, hey, we have this AI project, we are doing all this. The question to ask is, okay, show me the data. Show me the data. What is the provenance of that data? Have you done any analysis whatsoever on whose data it is that you're training the model on, right? Any analysis. Oh, yeah, it's completely well-balanced. Yeah, well-balanced is not our customer segment, unfortunately. So, our data should be representative of our customer segment. So I think with that, I'll leave you with that thought. And I thank you for your super patient and engaged listening and conversation. And I'm here for any questions for the next couple of minutes. Thank you. All right, perfect. I'll hang around for a few questions. Otherwise, we can see each other